Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And coming up on the program, we've got the latest on President Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East and the latest on the India-Pakistan situation. All of that and more on the way, but first, here's a look at the latest headlines. India brings back a border security force soldier days after he was detained by Pakistan for inadvertently crossing the border on April 23rd. This occurred a day after the deadly terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. The European Union approves a new round of sanctions on Russia, clamping down on its shadow oil fleet. This as Europe threatens further punishment if Moscow does not agree to a truce with Ukraine. Colombia formally agrees to join China's vast Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative. Beijing has emphasized growth in Latin America in a bid to counter the United States. France says it will expel more Algerian diplomats in response to plans by Algiers to send more French officials home. The move comes as relations between the two nations has soured in recent months. Starbucks in South Korea bans customers from using the names of the country's presidential candidates or the disgraced ex-president for their orders. South Korea prepares to hold snap elections on June 3rd. We begin with the latest details from President Donald Trump's tour of the Middle East, which began in Saudi Arabia just yesterday. The president met Syria's new interim leader, Mohammad al-Jolani, becoming the first U.S. president in 25 years to meet a Syrian leader. The two leaders were joined by Turkey's President Erdogan via video conference and Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for a brief meeting ahead of a larger gathering of Gulf leaders in Saudi Arabia. Now, the meeting comes after President Trump announced that the U.S. would be lifting sanctions on Damascus, a move that follows the ouster of Syria's longtime strongman Bashar al-Assad in December of last year.
There is a new government that will hopefully succeed in stabilizing the country and keeping peace. That's what we want to see in Syria. They've had their share of travesty, war, killing, many years. That's why my administration has already taken the first steps toward restoring normal relations between the United States and Syria.
Now, under Assad, Syria remained in a state of war with neighboring Israel, maintained close ties to Iran and Russia, and had turbulent relations with the West. Now, shifting that stance, President Trump said he was lifting the brutal and crippling sanctions after requests from Syria's allies in Turkey and Saudi Arabia.
After discussing the situation in Syria with the Crown Prince, your Crown Prince, and also with President Erdogan of Turkey, who called me the other day and asked for a very similar thing, among others, and friends of mine, people that I have a lot of respect for in the Middle East, I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
In Riyadh, President Trump also took aim at Iran, calling it the most destructive force in the region, and vowed once again to never allow it to obtain a nuclear weapon.
The biggest and most destructive of these forces is the regime in Iran, which has caused unthinkable suffering in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond.
Meanwhile, celebrations broke out across Syria as dozens gathered in cities to mark the end of sanctions, which the government called a turning point for the country's stability.
The sanctions only hurt the Syrian people, not the regime. The lifting of the sanctions is a wonderful thing. Thank you to whoever helped lift them.
With sanctions now off the table and diplomatic contact restored, Washington's relations with Damascus are now entering a new phase. But with Iran still in the crosshairs and questions remaining over who holds real power in post-Assad Syria, this new chapter is likely to be closely watched, both in the region and beyond. And now to ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan. President Donald Trump has once again made claims of brokering a truce between India and Pakistan. And these repeated claims by President Trump have put New Delhi at a critical diplomatic crossroads. Addressing an investment summit in Saudi Arabia, President Trump reaffirmed his claim that it was the United States that helped broker a military truce between the two neighbors. The president even added that he offered trade incentives to both New Delhi and Islamabad to de-escalate tensions, which was a big reason why the fighting stopped.
Just days ago, my administration successfully brokered a historic ceasefire to stop the escalating violence between India and Pakistan. And I used trade to a large extent to do it. I said, fellas, come on, let's make a deal. Let's do some trading. Let's not trade nuclear missiles. Let's trade the things that you make so beautifully.
But India has rebuffed this claim. In fact, the Indian government has maintained and has reiterated that the truce was worked out between the DGMOs of the two countries during a call and that there was no foreign intermediary. India's Ministry of External Affairs said the request for this call was sent by the Pakistan High Commission.
See, the specific date, time and wording of the understanding was worked out between the DGMOs of the two countries at their phone call on 10th May 2025, commencing at 15:35 hours. The Foreign Secretary had made a statement in this regard, as you would be aware. The request for this call was received by MEA from the Pakistani High Commission at 12:37 hours.
India has also clearly stated that only the military situation was discussed in conversations with U.S. officials and that there was no mention of trade, which directly contradicts President Trump's claims.
From the time of Operation Sindoor, commenced on 7th May, till the understanding on cessation of firing and military action on 10th May, there were conversations between Indian and US leaders on the evolving military situation. The issue of trade did not come up in any of these discussions.
On May 7th, under Operation Sindoor, India targeted terror camps and hubs in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and a heavy exchange of drones, missiles, and artillery followed in subsequent days. In fact, on May 10th, President Trump, in a post on Truth Social, announced a ceasefire between India and Pakistan even before either of the two sides did. He said the U.S. helped the two sides arrive at the historic decision. And the next day, in another post, President Trump said he would work with both India and Pakistan to find a solution to Kashmir. When asked about President Trump's offer, India's Ministry of External Affairs reiterated that its policy has not changed and that the matter is a bilateral one. Jammu and Kashmir are an integral part of India, and the government reiterated that the outstanding matter pertains to illegally occupied Indian territory by Pakistan. In fact, for years, India has maintained that it will not accept third-party intervention on the matter.
As you are aware, we have a long-standing national position that any issues pertaining to the Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir have to be addressed by India and Pakistan bilaterally. That stated policy has not changed. As you are aware, the outstanding matter is the vacation of illegally occupied Indian territory by Pakistan.
Now, in recent years, during President Trump's first term and Joe Biden's presidency, India and the United States have substantially grown the bilateral partnership and deepened cooperation on trade, security, counterterrorism, and technology. But President Trump's repeated claims of a truce and India's constant counter to it could put the ties between the two countries to the test. And now to Canada, where in a powerful moment of cultural affirmation, Indian origin Anita Anand took the oath as Canada's new foreign minister with her hand on the Bhagavad Gita. As the first Hindu woman to hold this key position, Anand's rise comes at a time when Canada's foreign policy faces heightened challenges, especially with India. With deep Indian roots and a sharp political resume, Anand now stands at the intersection of identity and international strategy. But what lies ahead remains uncertain. Our next report unpacks her political rise.
After Kash Patel's oath as FBI director with the Bhagavad Gita, another Indian origin leader has followed suit, this time in Canada. Anita Anand, the 58-year-old Canadian MP from Oakville, made history on May 13. She became Canada's first Hindu woman foreign minister, taking her oath with her hand on the sacred Hindu scripture. It marked not only a spiritual affirmation but a powerful statement of identity.
I, Indira Anita Anand, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear.
Anand's elevation comes amid a stormy chapter in Canada's foreign relations. As Prime Minister Mark Carney reshapes his cabinet after replacing Justin Trudeau, the spotlight is now on her. With a hand on her roots and eyes on global diplomacy, Anita Anand enters one of the most crucial phases of her political journey. Born in Nova Scotia to Indian immigrant doctors, her mother Saroj from Punjab and her father S.V. Anand from Tamil Nadu, Anita embodies India's cultural diversity. Raised in Kentville, she has 4 academic degrees under her belt. Her ministerial career too has been nothing short of stellar. As Minister of Public Services and Procurement, she led Canada's COVID-19 vaccine strategy. She earned praise for securing millions of doses under pressure. And later, as Defense Minister, she even played a critical role in supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. But her return to prominence came in September 2024 as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. And now, as Foreign Minister, she replaces Melanie Joly, who has taken over the Industry Ministry. However, Anita Anand steps into the role during turbulent times. Canada-India relations hit rock bottom after the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia in 2023. Accusations by former Prime Minister Trudeau alleging Indian involvement worsened ties. Diplomatic expulsions followed and the rift only grew wider, with New Delhi demanding proof from Ottawa to back its claims. Anita Anand had previously taken a clear stance against hate speech, targeting Indian diplomats. In fact, in September 2023, she condemned Trudeau's statement, calling it a very difficult time and urging legal processes to continue. Now, alongside Anand, 3 other Indian origin leaders, Maninder Sidhu, Ruby Sahota and Randeep Sarai, have also joined Carney's team. The reshuffle features 28 ministers and 10 secretaries of state, blending fresh energy with veteran wisdom. Anita Anand's appointment could script a new chapter for Canada's diplomacy, especially for Indo-Canada ties. But as the world watches, one question lingers: can heritage and hope mend a geopolitical fracture?
And now shifting to corporate America, tech giant Microsoft has announced that it will be cutting about 6,000 jobs across all levels, teams, and geographies as it looks to slash unnecessary layers of management amid a boom in artificial intelligence. The layoffs, amounting to around 3% of the company's global workforce, are the largest since Microsoft fired 10,000 employees earlier in 2023. Microsoft, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, says these job cuts will help position it for success in a fast-changing market.
We continue to implement organizational changes necessary to best position the company for success in a dynamic marketplace.
While performance-based layoffs had already taken place earlier this year, this round is broader in scope, focused on streamlining management and boosting efficiency. The move is part of a strategic shift aimed at increasing agility and aligning with core priorities, as emphasized by Chief Financial Officer Amy Hood's most recent call with investors.
We continue to focus on building high-performing teams and increasing our agility by reducing layers with fewer managers.
Now, the layoffs come amid a broader trend in the tech industry where companies are spending heavily on artificial intelligence while cutting costs elsewhere to safeguard profit margins. Now, Microsoft has earmarked $80 billion just this year to expand data centers and handle the demands of AI technologies. Yet despite that, the cost of scaling its AI infrastructure has weighed on profitability with its cloud. However, Microsoft isn't alone in having such issues. Big tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Meta have also made layoffs in order to invest in AI while attempting to remain competitive in this rapidly evolving industry. So with AI transforming the tech landscape, the pressure is on from investors to keep costs tight while spending big on the technologies that promise to define the future. And as the AI race intensifies, companies like Microsoft are making high-stakes bets on technology and on who stays to build it. And today we end with a startling new book that's exposed hidden fears within former President Joe Biden's inner circle during the final year of his presidency. The book, which is called Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again, reveals how aides secretly discussed using a wheelchair if the former president secured re-election. And even though the White House kept on publicly denying any concerns, the staff quietly prepared for the worst. Here's our final report on the behind-the-scenes reality of former President Joe Biden's last year in office.
The halls of the White House are known to hide policy talks and state secrets. But this time, there's more. This time, they masked a presidency that was quietly unraveling. In Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again, CNN's Jake Tapper and Axios reporter Alex Thompson expose the backstage chaos of Joe Biden's final year in office. The book, hitting shelves on May 20th, is packed with revelations that even longtime insiders didn't see coming. The authors interviewed over 200 people. Most of them are Democratic insiders, and their findings are startling. They reveal how Biden's top aides quietly worried about his health, especially during the 2024 re-election run. And behind the scenes, things were worse than the public ever knew. Biden's stiff walk, slow movements, and visible fatigue had become a growing concern. At one point, his team even discussed whether he might need a wheelchair if he won a second term. His doctor, Kevin O'Connor, even warned that one bad fall could lead to a long and difficult recovery. But aides knew that they couldn't risk showing weakness before the election. So they got creative. They mapped out shorter walking routes. They added handrails to the stairs. They had him wear sneakers more often. And when he boarded Air Force One, he used a smaller staircase to avoid climbing too high. They also tried to shield him from long days. As per the authors of the Original Sin, Biden had a short window of energy. That was from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And anything outside that made him more prone to slip-ups and confusion.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's
How
totally
bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak.
The book also shares some worrying moments. At a big fundraiser in California hosted by George Clooney, Biden looked the Hollywood star in the eye and didn't recognize him. Aides had to whisper who Clooney was, and not long after, Clooney pulled his support and urged Biden to drop out.
What you think was the impact of the op-ed you wrote for the New York Times asking President Biden to step down, which he eventually did?
You know, I've actually never had to answer that question, so I suppose I'll do it here. The person who should be applauded is the president who did the most selfless thing that anybody's done since George Washington, and that's true.
Now, after the former president's withdrawal, former Vice President Kamala Harris was swooped in to take the position. In fact, a former top campaign aide told the authors of the book that Joe Biden totally f***ed us by leaving it too late to drop out of the 2024 presidential election.
Kamala Harris.
But despite all of this, the White House kept insisting that Biden was fine. In fact, when the White House was questioned if the former president was suffering from Parkinson's disease, his aides denied these reports, claiming he was aging but was still sharp.
Has the president been treated for Parkinson's? No. Is he being treated for Parkinson's? No, he's not. Is he taking medication for Parkinson's? No. So those are the things that I can give you full-blown answers on, but I'm not going to confirm a specialist, any specialist that comes to the White House out of privacy.
However, the tipping point came during Biden's debate with Donald Trump on June 27, 2024. His performance raised alarm across the Democratic Party, and just 3 weeks later, on July 24th, Biden ended his campaign and backed Vice President Kamala Harris.
You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
Biden's decision to step down left some party insiders furious. But the book Original Sin claims there was far more going on behind the scenes. And with the book's release just days away, one question lingers. What else did the White House not tell us?
That's Firstpost America for this Wednesday, May 14th. I'm Eric Ham signing off from our studios here in Washington. Thanks everyone for tuning in.